Imagine waking up one morning to find your world completely turned upside down. The lights are out, gas stations are running on empty, and your electricity bill has doubled overnight. Chaos reigns as businesses close, production lines grind to a halt, and the economy begins to tremble. This isn't some far-off disaster scenario, nor is it a dystopian fiction. If tensions between the U.S. and Canada escalate, this could be a reality. And the culprit? Energy. Canada, the world's second-largest country, is not just a neighbor, it's been a vital energy supplier to the United States for decades. The U.S. depends on Canada for a massive share of its energy resources, including oil, natural gas, and uranium, which power homes, keep industries running, and support the booming electric vehicle (EV) market. But the relationship between these two nations, once defined by mutual dependence, is now under threat, and the consequences could be disastrous for the U.S. What's happening? How did we get here? And what's at stake? Let's take a closer look at this brewing energy crisis, one that could escalate into a full-scale trade war with global ramifications. The global race for electric vehicles, EVs. To understand the gravity of the situation, we need to look at the current state of the electric vehicle market, which has been one of the most exciting and rapidly growing sectors in recent years. Companies like Tesla have led the charge, promising a future filled with affordable electric cars that would revolutionize transportation and reduce the world's reliance on fossil fuels. But there's a twist in the plot. In China, the world's largest EV market, a brutal price war is intensifying. Domestic automakers have been offering steep discounts, causing a price race that's shaking up the global market. If Tesla hadn't slashed its prices by 20–30%, they would have likely seen a drop in sales. Meanwhile, BYD, a Chinese car maker, has made significant progress, closing the gap with Tesla. In 2021, Tesla sold 600,000 more cars than BYD. By 2023, that difference had narrowed to just 230,000 cars, with BYD even surpassing Tesla in the sale of battery electric vehicles in the last quarter of the year. The EV race is no longer a one-way street, and the stakes are getting higher. The U.S. Canada energy relationship. For decades, Canada has quietly fueled the U.S. economy. Around 60% of the crude oil the U.S. imports comes from Canada, along with 99% of its natural gas, and a significant portion of the uranium used to power nuclear plants. These resources are integral to keeping American homes warm, industries running, and electric vehicles rolling off production lines. However, growing trade tensions have put this long-standing relationship in jeopardy. It all started when the U.S. imposed tariffs on Canadian products like steel, aluminum, and materials essential for EV batteries. At the same time, Washington pressured Canada to cut back on fossil fuel production to meet climate goals. Despite these demands, the U.S. continued to rely heavily on Canadian oil to stabilize gas prices. In response, Canada decided to strike back, hard. Canada's bold energy restrictions Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has made it clear that Canada is no longer willing to play the quiet supplier. In an unprecedented move, Canada announced a series of energy restrictions targeting the U.S. These include limiting crude oil exports, which would disrupt fuel supply lines, imposing stricter limits on natural gas, which heats millions of U.S. homes, and restricting uranium exports, jeopardizing nuclear power plants that provide energy to 1 in 5 American households. If these restrictions go into effect, the results could be catastrophic. The U.S. could face soaring gas prices, blackouts, and widespread economic disruption. The once stable energy trade between the two countries is on the brink of collapse, and the U.S. is ill-prepared for the fallout. The impact on the U.S. economy. Canada is not just an energy supplier, it's a cornerstone of the U.S. economy. The 60% of crude oil and 99% of natural gas imported from Canada are essential to keeping the lights on and industries running. If Canada pulls the plug, the effects would be felt immediately and across the board. Gas prices and cost of living. With a dramatic reduction in available oil and gas, fuel prices would skyrocket. The cost of everything from daily commutes to shipping goods would increase. Families already struggling with inflation would see their energy bills soar, making it harder to pay for basic necessities. Food prices would also rise as the cost of production and transportation climbs. Job losses. Factories and businesses that depend on affordable energy could shut down or scale back operations. This would lead to massive job losses, especially in industries like manufacturing and electric vehicle production. States like Michigan and Texas, home to major auto manufacturing hubs, could see thousands of workers lose their jobs as automakers are forced to halt production due to a lack of critical resources. Electric vehicle industry crisis. The EV industry, which was supposed to be the future of transportation, would also be hit hard. Canada supplies a significant portion of the raw materials needed for EV batteries, including nickel, lithium, and aluminum. Without these minerals, the cost of manufacturing electric vehicles would increase dramatically. Tesla, which relies heavily on Canadian nickel for its battery supply chain, would find its plans to dominate the EV market in jeopardy. The future of affordable electric vehicles could be at risk. Power grid collapse. Nearly 30 U.S. states rely on Canadian electricity to keep the lights on. If Canada cuts off energy exports, entire regions could face power outages. States in the Northeast, like New York and Michigan, would be especially vulnerable, as would the Western and Midwestern states. A power grid failure would lead to rolling blackouts, crippling businesses and essential services like hospitals and transportation networks. Global ramifications and geopolitical shifts. This conflict isn't just a U.S. Canada issue. It's part of a larger global energy shift. As Canada considers severing ties with the U.S., other nations are already positioning themselves to take advantage. China's move. China, seeing an opportunity to secure Canadian energy resources, has already begun negotiating energy deals with Ottawa. This would strengthen China's energy security while leaving the U.S. scrambling for new sources of oil, gas, and uranium. Europe's response. With Russia's energy exports already causing instability in Europe, the EU is closely watching the situation. European leaders are seeking alternative energy suppliers to avoid further reliance on U.S. energy markets. This could lead to a shift in the balance of power, as Europe seeks to reduce its dependence on the U.S. while building stronger ties with Canada and other resource-rich countries. Developing economies rising. As the U.S. focuses on its trade war with Canada, developing countries like India and Brazil are seizing the opportunity to establish new trade agreements with Canada. These countries are positioning themselves as important players in the global energy market, potentially reshaping global energy dynamics in the years to come. The final countdown. With just 30 days left before Canada starts blocking all energy exports, the situation is becoming critical. The U.S. government is scrambling to find a resolution, but Prime Minister Trudeau is holding firm. He has a list of demands, including stricter environmental policies and the removal of trade barriers on Canadian goods. On the other hand, former President Donald Trump has called for even tougher measures against Canada, advocating for even higher tariffs on Canadian imports. As the clock ticks down, the question remains: will the U.S. and Canada come to a last-minute agreement? Or will this be the beginning of one of the most intense trade wars in modern history? The future of the U.S. economy hangs in the balance. Blackouts, skyrocketing gas prices, job losses, and economic instability are all looming on the horizon. The next few weeks will determine whether diplomacy can save the day, or if this standoff will lead to an economic disaster of historic proportions. The energy standoff between the U.S. and Canada is far from over, and the outcome could reshape the global energy market for decades to come. Stay tuned. This story is just beginning.